Hey, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to have you guys here. We're going to be doing our Designing Impactful Surveys Masterclass. So we're very much looking forward to having you guys with us today. So my name's Jason Reilly. I am a senior manager with the Medallia strategy and analytics team. I've been in the industry for 22 years. I also teach survey design, statistics, and our programming at Syracuse University. Joining me today is Tami.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tami Salmi. I lead Medallia's research services team. I've been with the company for 6 years now. I am a self-proclaimed data-driven nerd. Love designing surveys and really excited to chat with you guys today.
So, to be fair, we're going to be covering a lot of content today. We're taking you from Survey Design 101 all the way here at the top, all the way to Survey Design 201. So we're going to be trying to cram 2 semesters worth of content into one 45-minute session. I might go a little fast. As a note, if any of you guys have a question and I'm talking, don't hesitate to scream, don't hesitate to throw something. Sometimes it's the only way to get my attention. As a note, there is going to be a surprise quiz at the end of this class. People in the front are getting bonus points if that's going to change your decision on where to sit. Just as a quick FYI. No, I'm kidding about that. All right, so we're covering a couple of different topics today. Some of what we're going to be talking about is really helping you to answer overall 3 questions, right? 1, are you identifying what matters? Do you have intent in your survey design? Are you looking at your survey as an opportunity to ask actual, meaningful, and impactful questions? 2, are you doing the best that you can to capture signal and survey? We talked about this a little bit already at the keynote, right? How do you combine your survey signals with operational data, the structured and unstructured? How do you bring that together? And then 3, how do you take those signals and action them? How do you turn what you're gathering, what you're checking, what you're asking about, and turning that into a meaningful and actionable setup? First question for you. Who here knows why they build a survey? Raise your hand if you know why you're building your survey. What action are you trying to influence? What behavior? What ROI metric? Does anyone know how their survey, as it currently exists, how it influences your business? Is anyone able to answer that question right now? Okay, you're in the right place. All right, so when you're building a survey, the first talk about why we talk about intent is because what do you want to do with the information? I mean, you can make a survey for no purpose, right? You can put together a bunch of questions. Hey, what's your favorite type of dog? What's your favorite cat? Feel free. It's not going to get you anywhere, right? And we talk about survey, exhaustion. People are getting so many surveys all the time that they don't know what to do with them all. They don't want to answer any more questions. They're done. So when you build a survey, you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do with this information? How does this tie to a business metric? How do I know if I'm getting a 5 out of 5 on an OSAT survey that that's going to lead to repeat business, or that's going to lead to future stays, or that's going to lead to new orders, or that's going to lead to new revenue, right? How does that tie together? These are the questions you need to start asking yourself. Now, next poll for you guys. Raise your hand if you're using NPS or LTR. Okay, nice. Okay, keep your hands up. Now raise your hand if you're using OSAT. Okay, perfect. And raise your hand if you're using effort or CES. Okay, new show of hands. How many of you are using more than one? Okay, perfect. So what you're looking at here with these questions is they all have different things that they're trying to track, which means if you're using more than one, your survey lacks intent. You don't know which way your survey is going to drive your business. Because when you ask these type of what we call dependent variable questions, NPS, LTR, OSAT, CES, when you ask these questions on the same survey, the majority of the time, your customers are going to answer them very closely together, especially if they're back-to-back. You start with, how likely are you to recommend my company? How likely are you to recommend Bob, who helped you with whatever problem? How satisfied were you with what Bob did. So if I'm sitting there and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to tell Bob that I was very satisfied with his help, then my logical conclusion is that I'm probably going to recommend Bob. That's my thought process. That's how I'm going to work through the survey flow. Even if that question comes later, that's what I'm going to do. One of the key takeaways I want you to remember from this masterclass is that if you are taking a dependent variable, take one. Understand what you're asking about and why. Do you care about effort? Do you care about satisfaction and building good experiences? Do you care if the person is actually going to promote your brand or talk to you to their friends and family? Those are different questions, and it's completely okay to care about all three. Build 3 separate surveys. If you want all 3, build 3 separate ones. If you want one, just build one. Okay, so I talked about survey flow a little bit. Why does it matter? So as I said, when you have your overall metric or dependent variable, this is core to the CX question you're trying to answer. So when you're looking at this and you care about NPS, that's going to be your first question. How likely are you to recommend? And then we'll convert to the NPS scale afterwards. You want to have an overall metric open-ended question as well, just because that puts a little context around it. We talked about unstructured data already. This is an example of that unstructured data. In general, your key focus is to keep your survey short. You don't necessarily want to have 3 dependent variables with 3 subsets of KPIs, with 3 subsets of drivers. That's too long. That's what I like to call a kitchen sink survey. I'm asking about everything. Every possible metric, every possible touch point, every possible distraction that could have occurred during my customer's experience, I want to ask about because I want to have every question represented. That's going to hurt your response rate, it's going to hurt your complete rate, it's going to hurt people's engagement, and it's going to, over the long term, reduce the number of people willing to take your survey. I've seen a lot of kitchen sink surveys in my time. And 9 times out of 10, when I go through them and I'm trying to analyze them, which I'll talk about a little bit towards the end, when I go through and I try to analyze them, I end up having to drop so much out of it. So few people responded to this, I can't give you an answer on this. They skipped it. It wasn't something that they cared about. Okay, so show versus tell. So if I'm telling you to cut questions out, how do you track this information? So a great example of this is AHT. How many people here have call center operations? Okay, good. How many of you guys care about lowering AHT? Couple of you? Okay, good. All right, so you can ask a survey question. You could set up a survey question that says, how satisfied were you with the length of time it took to resolve your issue today? Okay, classic survey question. Most of you guys who have call center operations should be seeing something like that or have probably seen something like that in your careers. Nothing wrong with that. Perfect. How many of you guys would also then want to add another question maybe? Hey, do you feel that your issue was resolved? Right? Was your issue resolved today? So one of the things that happens is that when you look at this through a linear regression model or some other kind of regression model, and you control for issue resolution, then the length of time no longer matters. And you can see that people who have their issue resolved don't care about the length of time it took to resolve the issue, and people who did not have their issue resolved absolutely care about the amount of time they spend on the phone. And we were able to quantify that in an interesting case study, the notes of which will be in the PDF after this, after the conference. What we were able to see is that we could have calls that were 15, 16, 17 minutes long, which according to the client's best-in-class expectation was double the length of time of what an agent should have taken. But the issue was resolved and the comments were like, wow, the agent was so quick. The agent was so fast. I've never had a better call experience in my life. Issue resolved. Issue not resolved. Call times, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. This was the longest call of my life. Time, after all, is relative, right? So when you're looking at your data, it's important to say, okay, what can we quantify about the experience so we don't have to ask about that? Can we look at AHT? Can we look at how an agent is approaching their tools and utilizing them? Can we see what the customer was calling about? Can we tell from an operational perspective, is it fixed afterwards? So for example, like a cable company, they're calling because their service is out. Can we see that service has been restored after the call? That is an objective measure of issue resolution. The time it took for the agent to get that delivered is an objective measure of the time it took to get the issue resolved, which allows us to then have conversations about goal setting. How much time do we actually want to spend on the phone talking about lack of TV, lack of internet, whatever for the cable case? All of those things matter. Don't be afraid to break barriers down and silos down in your organizations. This is just a basic data set of things that I've personally worked with or seen. Some of this is Medallia DXA, for example, should be something you guys recognize. Some of this isn't, like MCIF files. But this is all stuff that I've worked with. And sometimes I didn't have direct access to it. I had to go talk to somebody. I had to say, hey, I need to get some access to some data that you have because I'm trying to make things better. Don't be afraid to have those conversations. Silos are your worst enemy. If all you have access to is your survey data, you guys just saw it at the keynote. You're missing 90% of your signal. There's so much more out there. You guys have all of this. I can guarantee you this data or some version of it exists in your organizations. If you're looking to understand the signals and the customer experience, this is data that you should be looking for. This is data that you should absolutely be wanting to find. Because when you pull this into your surveys, it's going to make them stronger and it's going to make them better. I'm going to turn it over to Tami.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about some of the little details now. So the first one's going to be, should I put all of my questions on one page or should I break it up over multiple pages? And this is all going to be about user experience. We, remember, are designing surveys for the people that take them. So we want you to think about this. Ask yourself, how important is it that I need to keep respondents really focused on a clean interface, right? I want them focused only on one or two questions at a time. Maybe, as you saw, we have some logical sections to our survey. We should break it up because of that. Maybe if we put it all on one page, it's going to feel really overwhelming to someone. The end goal here is to create the user experience that we desire so people are engaged with the survey. And for us, we generally recommend multiple pages, but I will say, do not take that to mean that we recommend long surveys. We still want you to be focused on having short surveys that are really smart. All right, next, flex question. What this means, you can see an example on the screen, is simply just asking someone, do you have time to answer a few more questions? Now, the reason that we do this is because we see abandonment issues. People are dropping off the survey in the middle. So how we can guide you is to say, hey, what questions are really critical? What questions are nice to have? And then we plant the flex after those critical questions. That allows the respondent, it empowers them to say, yeah, I'll give you 2 more minutes. I'll give you the more time. I can answer those nice to have questions. The really fun thing about this is it's super easy to test. You can implement this. All you're looking for is an increase in response rates in the critical questions, and you can decide whether this was a good ad or not a great ad if we're not getting the value out of those increased response rates. Okay, required questions. Now, I think the interesting thing here is that we can create some frustration when we're requiring questions. We don't want to do that. Our general recommendation is to, of course, again, focus on the critical ones, require those, but ultimately, if we require everything, we can increase abandonment rates, which we don't want to do. So those nice to have questions, keep them optional. Keep them optional. Now, along the same lines, people always ask, well, should I have an NA? Should I offer a don't know option? So some of my survey questions, my drivers. The alternative is just allowing people to skip a question. So we don't necessarily have to have that added column. Now we, again, are data lovers. So we're here to tell you that our main objective here is to have quality data. And in order to do that, we need respondents to have a way to tell us that a question doesn't apply to them. The easiest way for us to do that, the most obvious way to do that, is to have an NA or have a don't know. If we want to think about that alternative, that skip, In this case, we're going to be relying on some instruction text. They might be moving fast, too fast. They're going to read right over it. What we never want is to have someone answer a question that doesn't apply, because that's going to jeopardize our data quality. So again, the recommendation here is have that NA, have that don't know. All right, you're all CX and EX experts. You guys know that it's important to follow up with customers, follow up with employees, close the loop, right? That's how we learn. That's how we improve. That's how we build trust with our customers. The reality is we do recommend asking for permission to contact. The reason is that we want respondents to know that we respect their privacy. We want to make sure that if we're collecting phone numbers, if we're collecting email addresses, be transparent. Tell them what we're going to do with that information. Ultimately, we want to set the expectation that we're not necessarily going to contact you, right? We are just saying, do we have that permission? I cannot emphasize enough the importance of survey design. When we have a survey that is well designed with a very nice, clean layout, we are going to get respondents really focused on questions. When they're focused, they're going to answer them more honestly. They're going to answer them with better intent, right? They're going to provide that thoughtful feedback. Design should not be overlooked. And I think a lot of you in this room may already have a survey program. And if that's the case, and you haven't touched it in 2 years because the survey's working, the data's working, that's great. Please don't overlook survey design. This is what's going to get people engaged. And remember, this is an extension of your brand, right? This is when we call our friends in marketing and say, hey, help us. Help us get that perfect email invitation. Help us design the survey, put some fancy graphics in it, right? We can do so much. The ability in Medallia to make a really nice, sleek survey is there. So the reality is this is important because we can get people to focus on the questions, and we're getting better quality data out of this. All right. Now, we've talked about some of those big pieces of the overall survey design. We're going to focus now on question design.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to jump in here really quickly. There's a couple of things that are near and dear to my heart based on questions and feedback that I've been getting from clients like you. So the first question that always comes up is scale design, right? 0 to 10, 11 point, 1 to 5, 1 to 7. In general, these are all the same. These are what are called pseudo-continuous Likert scales. Basically, they're great, they work, they've worked for many, many years. Are these necessarily going to be any better going from a 5 point to an 11 point? Yes. You might see a little bit more improvement in your signal. That being said, if you have 5 point scales, that's great. They work too. There's lots of studies that have been done that show that they work, that they're engaged. People understand them, which is critical and important. People work with them. Really, at the end of the day, what matters is it consistent? A lot of social survey data, for example, comes across as 5 point scales. So if you're going to be seeing social media as a critical component of your CX strategy, then yes, you absolutely want to probably keep 5 point scales consistent throughout, because it will keep it consistent. It will make it easier for you to analyze and compare between the different scale periods. That being said, this is really an art, not necessarily a science here. If you do need to have multiple different scales, it's okay. The main thing is that when you are doing them, don't just put the numbers out there. At least try to explain a little bit about what the numbers mean to you. It's important that the person taking the survey understands how you're interpreting it. What is a 0? What is a 1? What is a 5? What is a 10? This is especially true if you have what's called a bipolar scale, right? You have a 0, you have a neutral, and then you have a 10, and that's like highly, satisfied versus highly unsatisfied, right? So you have that range. So it's important to make sure you're providing some text around here. Also, another critical thing, one aspect of anchors that we have seen is that they do improve response rate. When people have a better understanding of what you're actually asking for and how to interpret it, they can better align it with their own experience and give you that experience information. The final major note that I want to make sure is included here, no images, no emojis, no color. Okay, so generally, from a design perspective or from a marketing perspective, your colors are important. That's all critical, and you guys like it, and you're engaged with it, and I understand. Culturally, however, When you're including things like red or green, people are going to interpret red equals bad, red equals stop, red equals danger, red equals warning. Green equals good, green equals money. Who doesn't like that? Green equals happy, green equals go, right? When you're driving, do you prefer to see green lights or red lights, right? Same thing. When you put colors on or you put emoji symbols like smiley faces and frowny faces, or you put beautiful images of your retail store environment in perfect condition, you are influencing how the survey is being responded to. You are replacing the imprecise memory that the person has of their experience with a pseudo memory of a perfect experience. Also avoid push language. Bob would love to hear about how much you loved his service to you when you were in the store, stuff like that. Lisa would love to get feedback on how she could be a better agent for you. When you do that kind of thing, you might think you're personifying it, right? But you're not. You're pushing people towards a specific type of answer. You're pushing them to be like, oh, I don't hate Lisa. I don't want to get her in trouble. So I'll say something nice about her so that no one will get her in trouble, right? Or you might not take the survey at all. I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't want to do this. It's okay to respond to a person. If a person gives you a 10, it's okay for the follow-up question to say something like, hey, we're happy that you're happy. Can you tell us what happened? Right? That's fine. You can always respond to what your customers are telling you. Don't tell them how to respond. That's the critical differentiation here. All right. Sorry, Tami, for interrupting. I'm going to hand it back to you now.
Oh, all good. We get to talk about the fun stuff now. These are features that are available today that you can put in your surveys that are going to help drive that engagement. And remember, engagement means we're getting better quality data. We have people that are being thoughtful. So we have in-page conditioning. Jason just described this. What we're doing is we're changing the text of a survey question based on the prior response. So you can see the example, they're a detractor, they're giving us that negative score. So we're changing the follow-up comment box to tell us just something a little differently. We're personalizing that experience. I have a joke that I want to just share. Hey, Jason, how are surveys like marriages?
How?
They ask a lot of questions and they never listen to the answers.
It's very true.
The reality is when we are able to change the text box, rather than saying, please give us the reason for your score, right? That's the most common one. It's very different than saying, we're thrilled you had a great experience. Tell us what you enjoyed most. That feels more personal. That's going to invite people to give us more thoughtful responses. Okay, the next one, comment boost. Does anyone have this implemented? Yay, I see some hands. This is exactly what it's described as, right? We're trying to encourage longer comments. The reality is that's going to give us richer information. Now we're going to get more insights from the data. Comment boost is awesome because it's that probe. You're talking with a friend, right? And they're saying, hey, tell me more. That's exactly what this is doing. It's mimicking that experience by providing all of these little tiny tweaks that are, by the way, completely customizable. You can make those things say whatever you want. So this is really easy to implement. It's also available in multiple languages, and you can have this done today. Okay, so you've designed the survey. We're talking about that. Time to go launch it, right? Pause, please pause. I just want to just encourage everyone to consider testing your survey. What do I mean by tests? Go talk to some customers. Maybe you have some friendly ones that they can just run the survey by them. Have them take it, give you their feedback. Because guess what? What's important to you might not be important to them. And I want to show you an example of this. We worked with a company that manufactures uniforms. And when I say that, they also rent them out. So you can wear the uniform, you put it in a basket, they come pick it up, they launder it, they bring it back. Their product team thought really hard about this list. What attributes are we going to ask about our uniforms? Looks pretty comprehensive, right? This is a nice list. Well, we went out and talked to 10 customers. That was it. And this is the list that they came up with. And you can see 2 items matched, 2, just the brands and just the comfort. Everything else that the customer cared about wasn't going to be in our survey. We learned this by talking to the customers. So as you think about getting the buy-in from your stakeholders, please don't leave out the people taking the survey. They can give you really, really, really great feedback to make that survey better. It's 2025 and we're still talking about using incentives. But just a quick reminder here, this can drive some response rates, significant increases, yes, but there's a drawback. People may be after the reward. So we have to remember that we're focused on quality data. We want people that are there to give us thoughtful responses, not try to collect a promo code. So there might be a way for us to have some alternatives, strike a balance, right? Maybe we're going to have a raffle. Maybe it's a donation to charity. But the concept is that we want you to take away the best practices of survey design so that you don't have to use an incentive. Because if we have a survey that is well designed, that is short, that is smart, we're going to be able to get that experience, to get those completion rates, and we don't need to use an incentive. All right. Now, we can't talk about surveys without talking about response rates. We are designing surveys so that people will take them, right? Now, at the end of the day, we assumed most people in this room already had a survey program. So we wanted to just walk a little bit through how to think about response rates and what that means about your survey design. Now, I can tell you, if you're here and you're not happy with your response rates, please remember that changing the survey isn't the answer. And I say that because response rates are the bottom of a funnel of a lot of health metrics. So when you think about survey health, we have to look at every piece of data available. What does that mean? We need to look at bounce rates. We're sending all these email invitations out. How many are actually landing in the inbox? Email open rates. That's exactly what it's described as, right? How many people clicked and opened that email? The next one, click-through rate. This is when we're seeing they're in the inbox. You made it that far. They opened the email. Did they click and start the survey? Did they give us that initial rating? And then we have response rates, right? And abandonment rates. How many people quit in the middle? And I want to show you why changing the survey might not necessarily be the answer with an example. So we have the Medallia benchmark because it's going to guide us here. That's going to be that top row. What you're going to see, I've got a couple of green boxes where I'm doing well. I'm performing better than the Medallia benchmark. But even though my response rate is slightly under the Medallia benchmark, where my problem is the click-through rate. So if this was your data and you're sitting here and you're going to go change your survey design, guess what? It's not going to matter. That's not going to matter at all because the problem is with the email invitation. The fix is the email. So please remember, if you have response rate problems, do not just go change your survey because it could be something else. Quick plugs here. If you don't have benchmarks in your instance, these are free. Anybody that opts in, participates, they can get them. By the way, we can slice and dice them by industry. They're available quarterly. This is something that everyone should have to get you benchmarks. And again, all that survey health data is in here. Another shout out, this is HealthWatch Best Practice Package. So if you do not know your survey health data, this is a pre-configured reporting dashboard, meaning it's out of the box. We literally have it available. Your servicing team can plug it in. You're going to get all that survey health data we just saw, but even better, you're going to get file health data. You're also going to be able to get really cool Medallia engagement data. How engaged are my users? Who's using the platform? What pages of the platform are they going to? This is pretty awesome. And the last thing is, okay, I'm not saying that you don't have to change the survey. We might have a response rate problem. When you think about abandonment, there's a really cool module available in that package that's going to show you abandonment rate by page. This is super simple, right? We want the data to drive the decisions. All we have to do is figure out where that drop-off is happening, go to that page, identify the problematic questions, make updates. Now, if you're still having issues with response rates and our abandonment data is not helping us, I want you to pay a lot of attention to what Jason's about to talk about. Because we love data, right? And there's a lot we can learn from the data of our existing surveys that's going to help us decide how should we make decisions to change our survey design. We're going to pause before we get into the fun stuff, but I just want to see if anyone's brave enough to ask the first question here today.
Is there a risk to seeing too high of a response rate? Like, should that tell you something?
You've got amazing customers.
Okay.
We're jealous.
Well, we're rocking around like 21, 24%. And it made me a little bit nervous. Be like, something funky going on. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that you can always use ACE or the anti-cheating engine just to make sure that there are no signals coming across in the survey's responses that it would indicate some kind of cheating or other issue. That would be the only thing. If you have ACE up and running, then I would say you should feel confident in those numbers.
You said earlier that you should dump out driving questions that are correlated, which makes sense. However,
is it sort of homogenous across B2B and B2C, or are there any nuances that you would recommend for a B2B customer using these tools, right? Is it, do the same rules apply, or do you have any stats on the metrics, right? Bounce rate, delivery, open rate, etc.
I think the same rules apply, but I will tell you that in general with B2B, we see poor quality data, right? We don't have as great contact information. So there generally is lower response rates because we have high bounce rates. So we do have, I think, more difficulty getting people to respond just by the nature of B2B from experience. But again, we can talk more, but I would say that the rest of it does apply though. Yeah. All right, we're going to keep moving, but it's not because we don't want to answer all your questions. We're still going to leave time at the end, but I just want to just really hit on some really cool things you can do with your data.
Yeah. All right, so you have a survey, it's set up, you have everything that you need to have good questions, you're getting engagement, people are actually opening the emails, they're responding to you. Great. What's the first thing you do? You use Medallia Experience Cloud. There's a lot of built-in dashboards and tools that exist in the platform that can help you understand what your responses look like. One critical lesson, after you build your survey, Tami said, don't just change everything because you're not seeing something that you're looking for. She's right. After you build it, you don't even want to do an analysis right away. You need to wait to get time. Rough rule of thumb, back of the napkin, 90 days. Let your survey run. You have to see if people are responding to it. You have to see what the trends look like before you can start analyzing it and seeing what's going on. While you're doing that, though, you can monitor things in Medallia Experience Cloud. You can look at stuff like trend lines, response rates, averages, so on and so forth. Now, if you are putting like trend lines in place, you're putting any kind of pivot tables in place, things like that, make sure you're adding the significance testing to it. It's basic t-tests. Set them for 95% satisfaction. If you don't know how to do that, your servicing team can absolutely help you, but make sure you're getting these things set up because these are going to give you useful signal. Are changes happening? Great. Are those changes significant? Even better to know. Another thing too, make sure you're looking at how response rate comes in. This is an excellent little chart. One of the things that can show you is what we were just talking about over there. When we see this kind of red line, all very close together, what this is telling me is that these questions are all probably being answered in a straight line. So somebody answers a 3 on one, they answer a 3 on the next, and they answer a 3 on the next, over and over and over again. So when you see that these lines are super tight, you're not seeing a lot of variance, that's another warning sign for you. Thinking about these things and what these signals are actually telling you is critical to helping you think like someone like me is going to look at when I take your data, pull it down, and start looking at it, right? Another thing to look for, distributions. You can build these in Medallia Experience Cloud. This was just something that I was building for a class, so I grabbed it and put it in here. But one of the things I want you to know is that nothing in here is wrong. Another thing I get a lot of is everybody's only answering a 5. Everybody's only answering a 4 and 5 or whatever, like right-leaning or extreme leans. These aren't necessarily wrong. Remember, we're CX oriented. We're not trying to ask these questions for a senior vice president or a C-suite executive. That's not why we're asking these questions. We're asking these questions to understand what the customers think. So we don't look at this and say, this is a bad question. We look at this and we say, our customers are telling us conclusively that they are very satisfied with this. We can now take this question off our survey. We can focus on something else. We can use this as an opportunity to experiment with other aspects of the customer experience. If we see a distribution like this, we don't say this is a bad question. It can't be included in the survey. What I see from this is really this is a bimodal question. Yes or no. I'm satisfied. I'm not satisfied. It's too far of a lean. Now, normal distributions are great. Normal distributions are also very rare. Do not be concerned if you don't have them. All right, another thing too is that you can look at scores over time. This is also a great example of why we care about signal. So you can see here's all these questions. They're all highly correlated. The lines all go in the same general direction. When we look at this, we would say, okay, we have an issue with the questions that we're asking. We're not seeing a lot of differentiation here. We're not seeing a lot of stuff that matters. More importantly, however, OSAT is at the bottom. Why is OSAT so low if everything else is so much higher? We dig into this and we find out that the reason that OSAT is lower is because we forgot to ask an important question. We missed a signal. That's why it was lower. There was a known unknown, and this allowed us to find it. This is where you start to get into where I tend to be happiest, where I'm pulling data down and I'm starting to look at correlations. So one of the things that we are trying to understand here is how are the variables interacting with each other? It came up earlier in a comment. When we have highly correlated questions, because they're all driver questions and they're all super correlated with each other, then it isn't something that we can put into a regression model of some kind. Whether it's a GLM or a standard linear regression, we can't really use it because it breaks the underlying assumptions that the model needs. Variable 5 and variable 7, for example, are 0.9. They're basically being answered identically in the same pattern. As one goes up, the other absolutely will go up. As one goes down, the other absolutely will go down. We're not getting useful signal there. So we need to look at this, or someone like me on your staff or here at Medallia will look at this and we'll say, look, these are questions that we can eliminate. In this case, we ended up getting rid of variable 7 and we replaced it with variable 5 because variable 5 was the leading indicator. The relationship made more sense. Our final goal, someone like me at your organization, a data scientist or a senior analyst, the final goal that we want to be able to get you to is to be able to say, here's your performance. And here's what matters to the customers. Here's what you need to focus on. We want to be able to tell you that your important opportunity, the estimated coefficient means that it's important to your customers. The mean performance means that you're not doing as well at it as you are other metrics. So we want you to focus on that. We want that to be something that you action on. That way you can take your survey and you can drive it to where it needs to be. Now, here's the cool thing. Every question you design, every question you put into your survey, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not wrong on any of them. Even these questions down here that are less important strengths, you're not wrong about them. When you include a survey question, I tell you to include it with intent. What is something that you need to understand in relationship to a critical metric, whether it's OSAT, MPS, whatever. When you see something like that, you might say, oh, I thought it was critical, but it's this less important strength. I obviously screwed up. No, that's not the language you use. You say, you have successfully proven the null hypothesis. You have successfully shown that this metric isn't important. Look at you saving time, energy, and effort for the organization. You are an efficiency driver. You are proud of that. That's the best part about statistics. Like, seriously, it's why I love this job. I'm never wrong. I'm either accepting my hypothesis or I'm accepting my null hypothesis. I love it. My wife, not so much. Okay. Finally, text analytics. Unstructured data. Hopefully more than just text. Hopefully you're pulling in a lot of other signal. But when you start to find out which questions you're asking are showing the strongest relationship to the core metrics that you care about, then text analytics allows you to deep dive. Text analytics allows you to find the questions that you don't even know you need to be asking. So that when you realize, yep, I figured out what's going on with this question, performance is good, it's no longer related to my key driver because we're doing so well at it, not a problem. I'm going to pull that out, I'm going to get rid of it, I'm going to replace it with pricing. Because pricing, we're not doing so well at that. right? This has a negative impact when we look at TA. And I don't have a question about that in my survey. I need to understand what about it. I need to start quantifying it. And so I'm going to create a question. I'm going to put it in there. All right. So if you want to learn more, please feel free to book a Meet the Expert session with me or Tami. Also, as a note, just want to call this out at this stage. We have little cue cards right here on the tables. We are looking for surveys to assess the class. Did you find it useful, interesting? Are you going to action on it? Please make sure you're taking that. We want to invite that out. And I will turn it over to you.
Yeah. We have 17 seconds left. So that means...
Sorry, guys. I wanted to leave more time.
We didn't leave enough time for questions at the end. So again, please just feel free to book the Meet the Expert sessions. We're happy to continue these conversations. And as you're heading out, just remember that we are going back to the main stage. So we are headed back up to see Will. So as you leave, take a screenshot or take a picture of that QR code, and then we'll see you upstairs.
Thank you, everybody.